Cool. So yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this Ask Hadley Anything, which will be for the next half hour. USAR is coming up with just under a month to go in Salzburg this year. And Hadley is a presenter, so there's a chance at that event to hear more from him. But today he's here as representing one of our sponsors that made USAR possible. So yeah, thank you. I guess Hadley, could you give us a quick intro to yourself and our sponsor, Posit?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jane. And thanks for having me. As you probably know, I write a lot of R packages, and me and my team look after both the tidyverse, which is a set of packages for doing data science, and the kind of the dev tools ecosystem of packages, which help folks maintain their own packages. So, for example, one of the things I've been working on recently is Package Down, which is the R package that we use to make websites for our other R packages. And now many other people use that package for their package websites too. So Posit, I work for Posit, which is a PBC or a public benefit corp. That's a little bit different to the traditional LLC. In an LLC, the kind of overarching goal of every LLC is to maximize shareholder revenue. That's kind of the mission of every LLC. The idea of a PBC is to relax that and to add some goals other than just making a ton of money. And so, the goals of Posit are to really support the data science ecosystems, R and Python, and scientific publishing in general. So we make a lot of open source software, but we also sell commercial products. Our main commercial products are Posit Workbench, Posit Connect, and Posit Package Manager. Basically designed to solve problems that larger teams of R users tend to have. So Posit Workbench allows you to run RStudio or VS Code or Jupyter Notebooks on centralized compute, which allows you to have a few big servers with a lot of computing power, or perhaps you're in a regulated environment and that allows you to run all your code in an environment where everything's set up correctly. Connect allows you to get the results of your analyses basically out of your hand and the decisions makers, whether that's by publishing Shiny apps or Dash apps or scheduled R markdowns or sending like an email with a link to a dashboard at 9 a.m. on every Friday. And then kind of last but not least is Posit Package Manager, which basically allows your organization to use a shared set of packages that have all the qualities that your organization might want. So that was a very quick overview, but I work on the open source side of Posit, but tremendously grateful for all of my colleagues who do make products that we sell for money because those pay for my salary.
Awesome, thank you. And I guess, yeah, also thanks to everyone because the questions are already coming in. But maybe starting broad with one of our earlier questions, and you're not allowed to use the Posit example here, like open source project, have you gotten excited about recently?
I would say I've been playing around a little bit with VS Code. Just pretty interesting IDE, or it's almost not exactly an IDE. It's almost like a tool for building your own IDE. But just been playing around with that, learning a bit about how it works, and it's been pretty interesting. Just very, very popular IDE used by all sorts of developers for other languages. So it's just been interesting to see what folks expect in kind of a modern IDE.
Okay. And I think that leads quite well into both a question we had before and a question that's just popped into the chat. But there was one there around like, what is your preferred IDE? And does it change depending on what you're doing? So examples being R package development, Python development, general data science. The one just in the chat is Shiny, as well as things like Quarto websites.
Yeah, I will say like 90% of what I do is package development. I do like a little bit of other things, hardly any package development, but a little bit of Shiny development, a few websites, a little bit of data science from time to time. So I really like to kind of like stick with as much as possible with one thing so I can really get familiar with it. So currently that means it's sort of a mix of RStudio, which is my kind of day-to-day driver, and then VS Code, which I'm just exploring and learning from.
Thank you. And you touched on this a little bit in your intro, but one of the questions was like today, what are the projects that you're working on?
Yeah, so package, I'm currently getting very close to finishing off a package down release. I think the kind of the two big features in this release are going to be having like optional dark mode for your website, so the users of your package website can flip between light mode and dark mode. Just very, very popular feature on websites. And perhaps a little bit more significantly, it also adds the ability to use Quarto for your vignettes in your packages. So traditionally, people have written their vignettes using R Markdown. Fairly recently, Cran has installed Quarto, and so now you can use Quarto to write your vignettes, which brings with like all of the nice features that Quarto have, from better figure layout and I think easier cross-referencing and equations and all that kind of stuff. So bringing that to your package vignettes as well. And that's kind of a dark art, because you've got to merge the templating systems of package down and Quarto together. So it's certainly never going to be like 100% perfect, but I think we can get to like 95% pretty easily and get most of the features that people care about working. And then as people report them, we'll fix bugs and add new stuff. But that should be coming very, very, very soon.
Thank you. And there was a question come in, which I think maybe touches a little bit on, I can't remember if it was your workshop or your talk, but someone said that they recently saw a video where you showed an example of web scraping and GitHub automation. And they asked,
yeah,
is there a possible use to use GitHub to automatically render multiple Quarto documents to PDF and HTML and upload them to a server?
Yeah, absolutely. I can just show you. Let's see. I think I managed to get this working like 5 seconds before this call. So let me see if I can turn on GitHub pages. I haven't done it yet. Well, let's put the link in the chat anyway. Hopefully we'll be working later, but I was just playing around with this today. Now Cran just released, they're now making it more clear which packages possibly scheduled for removal if they haven't fixed problems. So I've been working just to turn that into like a little dashboard that gets automatically updated every day by GitHub Action. So they seem to have like missed some steps, so the action is working, but can't see where it is publishing to. But anyway, like I think this sort of, is that not working?
We're making you having a live demo.
But this sort of thing, I think where you schedule or GitHub Action or something similar to do something and then publish it somewhere is like super, super useful, super powerful. And like basically you can do it today, it's just not terribly well documented. So one of the things I've been sort of thinking more generally about lately is this issue of like, how do you effectively use R in production? And to me, production, like the two, I think, big things that make putting R or putting anything in production challenging is that you've got to run your code is now being run like regularly, and it's being run on another computer. So I'm trying to do more and more of these things in GitHub Actions, these regular things, just to better learn like how can you write code that is both more reliable and when it fails gives you more actionable insights. So hopefully I will get this particular one working, and then as I set up a few more of them, I have to kind of start to document that process a bit better so other people and copy it. Another thing I did sort of along a similar lines, probably the video you saw was there was an artist I follow on TikTok, and every time he sold his work, it was always sold out by the time I found out about it. So I wrote a little script to scrape his website every 3 hours and then send a push notification to my phone whenever it changed so that I could finally buy some of the art. So I think there's a lot of cool little things you can do with GitHub Actions and that way, and I want to try and make this accessible to more people.
Okay. And maybe changing tack a little bit, but there's one question here around how does Posit balance having packages that they continue to support, like all the ones in the tidyverse, without the effort to keep these packages supported, not leaving capacity to do anything new?
Yeah, I mean that's a really tough challenge, and I think the other sort of aspect of this that we're starting to learn about is that like most people tend to get sick of maintaining the same package after somewhere between like 5 and 10 years. So that's kind of happened. Let's sort of have what's happened with me and dplyr. Like I love it, it's still close to my heart, but after so many years, you just want to do something else. And so the original strategy was to like hire, well, the original fix was to hire Thomas Peterson to maintain it. And now he's getting like sick of maintaining it. And so obviously like hiring a new person every time is not a terribly scalable strategy. So I don't know, I don't have any great insights here. I think one of the things we're trying to be more clear about in the tidyverse is just our development cadence and like how many packages most of the time are just kind of lying in this fallow state. Like we will keep them on cran, we will fix any kind of critical bugs that we come across, but they're mostly just kind of lying there accumulating issues until we notice like, oh, hey, there's a couple of weeks work on this package, and then we'll come back to it. But I think in general, like the thing that is tough is like saying no to people, and I think we have gotten like better at that a bit in terms of just being like, hey, this is a cool idea. We'd love to do it, but we just don't have the time, and we're probably never going to have the time. And so like closing issues down for that reason, which kind of sucks, but like we have to carve out the time and the energy to work on new stuff as well as maintaining old stuff. So that's the bummer.
Okay. And there's one question here specifically about BSlib. And so the person's mentioning that it's becoming a one-stop shop for Shiny dashboard development. But what additional functionality would you like to see added to the package?
Yeah, I use BSlib mostly in kind of weird or unusual ways because I'm using it for like package down or for other bits and pieces. I think most recently been exploring the idea of adding like a gallery page to package down sites that use BSlib cards. And that, I don't know, that all seems to work pretty well. It's definitely a little, I think that the challenge I have with BSlib is that it's often hard to figure out, like you've got to kind of cross-reference the BSlib docs with the Bootstrap docs to figure out if there's something that is specific that you're trying to achieve. Sometimes it's just easier to write the HTML yourself. So I don't have anything. I don't feel particularly limited by BSlib just because you can always go out and write the HTML yourself if you want.
Okay. And there were a few questions kind of asking for updates on specific topics. So maybe looking across ggviz, mastering Shiny, and also dplyr.
Yeah.
I guess, is there anything hot off the news or coming for those three projects?
Yeah, ggviz is definitely unlikely to ever see another update. But Thomas is starting to think about kind of what the future of graphics should look like in R. It's not kind of super clear exactly what that should be and how that ties in with web graphics and reactivity, but he's starting to do a bunch of projects to kind of explore that. So nothing in the near future, but definitely something that he's starting to think more about. Mastering Shiny. I don't have any current plans to update it. We've talked about doing like a translation of Mastering Shiny to Python. I think that's probably more likely to happen first, just as we try and help Python folks master Shiny as well. And then dplyr, I don't know, it's just like a steady. I think dplyr seems to be like a pretty important package for a lot of people, and we'll just continue to see like a steady stream of fixes and improvements. I'm really grateful that dplyr now has another maintainer, Maximilian Gerlich, who has been contributing a lot of the fixes lately. So it's been really great to have someone else thinking about it and caring about it, because it's definitely a package that just has like a lot. It's just a long tail of small issues and just like grinding down all these minor SQL translation problems. I think the only thing that I'll be kind of like specifically kind of pitching in on in the database ecosystem at the moment is just around integrations with our partners. Posit's now partnering with Databricks and Snowflake, and just doing anything I can do on the open source side to make sure if you are using Databricks or Snowflake, that everything just like works seamlessly and painlessly from RStudio and from our R packages. So you don't have to like, fretting about it all the various different things. It just works and like disappears into the background.
Okay, and as you mentioned, the potential translation for the Python community, there's a couple of questions in that space. I think one, I like the wording, the way it was worded was, what type of topics you discuss when you have a work meeting with Wes McKinney?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we discussed, is how to make R and Python work better together. And I think this kind of a story there is the same as it's been for quite a long time, that there's just like a lot of stuff that you don't want to write in R or Python. You want to write in like C or C++ or Rust or some other high performance programming language. And that's, and then on top of that, you build a nice user interface in R or Python. I think like we've seen that with like DuckDB. We've seen that with like some interesting work in polars. It's just, I don't know, like the Articulate package in R makes that easier to talk between the two. The Arrow project for sharing data across them, that just feels, I don't know, like in some way, it feels to me like it's just getting easier and easier to collaborate across these boundaries. One thing that Gabor Chardi and my team did recently was write a little package for reading Parquet files into R. You can certainly do that with Arrow, but Arrow is like a big heavy dependency. This is like, I think we called it Nano Parquet. It is a very, very lightweight package, but just makes it easier to use this, pretty standard file format in R if you're working with smaller data sets as well. So just kind of continuing to look for opportunities to collaborate across language boundaries.
Okay. And there was another question which was worded, how do you see the role of R and its ecosystem evolving to meet the growing number of data scientists that also know generic Python languages like Python? And I guess maybe you've talked a little bit about the interoperability, but do you think R and R scope and where the focus of R and its ecosystem would be impacted by the introduction of more Python? Or
yeah, I mean it's interesting because Python is like legitimately the most popular programming language on the planet right now. Incredibly powerful general purpose tool. And there's obviously like a lot of advantages to having one tool that you turn to for like every problem you could possibly imagine. And that's Python. But there's also advantages to working with tools that like specialize for the problem at hand, like R. Because Python, there's just no way that in Python you're ever going to be able to, I think, interact with data as fluidly as you can with R, because of the way that like missing values are built into the language, because of the way non-standard evaluation works in R and allows us to write interfaces like ggplot2 and dplyr. Like, yeah, sure, the R community is smaller and there's lots of things that R can't do that Python can do, but I don't know. I think at the end of the day, like we can have like general purpose tools and we can have special purpose tools. And you know, like I love R, and I have no intention of stopping developing it. So
yeah. And then there's one here, we talked a little bit about kind of working with constraints on resources. There's a question here about, in a hypothetical scenario where you had unlimited resources, is there a project that you would either want to start or revive?
I think kind of one of the projects that's like really interesting to me is these tools for like gradual typing, where you add like types to a programming language, like TypeScript's a good example of this, or Pydantic's kind of in this space too, where the advantage of like adding types being like very strict for every function about what sorts of inputs it can take and what sort of outputs it produces, like it leads to better documentation, it leads to better error messages, and potentially it leads to much better performance. But that's pretty like that's languages with like strict type systems are pretty far away from R. But I think there's been interesting research lately in how you can kind of gradually add types into more dynamic languages. That would be a big project. It's kind of hard to tell what the payoffs would be in the long run, but I think that would be something I would love to invest more on, and you know, just figure out how we can make our programs both like safer and faster and more informative when they error.
Thank you. And I guess it wouldn't be a Q&A in 2024 without a LLM question. So there's one here on, what's your opinion on the future of data science during the era of tools like, they mentioned ChatGPT, but I guess there's also GitHub Copilot and similar IDE-based tools.
Yeah, I find it very hard to imagine that you can replace like a data scientist with anything less than kind of full on like generalized AI, because you have to bring so much domain knowledge and expertise to any problem apart from like just writing code. But I do think that LLMs are going to have a pretty transformative impact on the way that we write code. And certainly I think like it seems like it fundamentally changes how we might teach programming, because now you can express yourself in English or whatever and express yourself in a human language and get pretty reasonable code a lot of the time generated. I use Copilot. I found it like really interesting and useful particularly at doing like kind of tedious tasks, or like changing things between two different like structures. It seems to be pretty good at figuring out like guessing the old structure and the new structure, and then like prompting me. So there's things that like kind of routine bits of programming that I found it like really helpful for. I think in general, like it's really good at that kind of lower level, like pretty good at that lower level. Sometimes it just does like completely the wrong thing, but it doesn't. I don't know. I don't think it provides much sense of direction. So there's still really needs to be that human kind of in the loop steering the direction and thinking about the bigger picture and like what's the overall goal. And I think we're a very long way away from having LLMs to solve that gap. I mean, I think LLMs are really, really good at solving problems that have been solved times before, because it can just average out over all of those problems it's seen on the internet, the things that have never been done before. It's just clearly not as good. And I guess I'm very skeptical that we can kind of bootstrap genuine inferential capabilities just by throwing more and more data at it. So,
maybe extending this to one of my own questions. So like, for people like yourself and those at Posit that are professional package maintainers and developers, do you find the code completions, I guess if you have code completions enabled, does any of that get, you tab it in, or is it something where it's not using the correct style or it's not referencing? Like, I'm just interested if it's the code
Yeah,
completion
no,
is.
I'm like tabbing it in quite a lot. But again, it's just, like I've noticed it's really good. Like if I'm gonna write for like a function, like I've written the documentation and now I want to like check that each argument is the correct type. And like once I've done like the first two arguments, it's pretty good at just like stepping through all the other arguments and guessing what function I want to call to check its type. So it's stuff like that where it's like I would have figured that out. It wouldn't have taken me that long to type it, but now I can just like press tab and complete the whole thing instead of having to think about it. Sometimes, you know, sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing because you just it's easy. It's also easy for like subtle mistakes to creep in that way because you didn't really think about it, you didn't really read it. So there's definitely also a cost of just like tabbing in larger blocks of code because sometimes the effort of like understanding exactly what you just did is greater than the cost of like writing it yourself. But I'm definitely noticing like I'm kind of relying on it more, and even if it gets half the suggestion right, it's still useful to tab that in and then delete and change the rest of it.
Yeah. Okay. And so we have some questions that we won't be able to get to here. So I'll try to follow up, especially the ones that are asking questions about Posit products. So we can maybe get some help from the Posit team there. There's one here though, I guess from someone quite passionate to know if they want to become, so they're asking about becoming a data scientist at Posit. So I guess my first question is does that exist? And then just generally, you know, if you did want to become an engineer at Posit, like what makes a positier or whatever Posit calls themselves?
I don't know what we call ourselves. Yeah, so we do have a data science team. Like it's pretty small. I think it's about 4 people currently. It's pretty small and it's pretty scrappy. And I will say, like, my experience as the data science team at Posit has exactly the same problems that small data science teams have at every single company where they exist. You know, it's challenging to get high quality data. It's challenging to create, you know, dashboards that yield to actionable insights that don't have, you know, various execs trying to change things all the time. So I think because we have a small data science team, like if you want to be a data scientist at Posit, you have to be like, you know, sort of strong, and you've got to be able to act pretty independently and know like a little bit about all of the parts of the data science pipeline. Like you're likely to be doing a little bit of data engineering. You're going to be writing like some R code. You're going to be writing Shiny apps. You're going to be writing dashboards. Like you've got to have kind of the full stack of experience there. In engineering more broadly, you know, like on the open source side, we're looking for people who are generally like contributed to the R ecosystem already, present on GitHub, and it's certainly it's much easier to hire people that like we've interacted with positively in the past because we know like you're going to be a good fit. We can work with you already. But we also have a bunch of just, you know, general engineers who are, you know, I think if you're at the R community, like Posit is a company that you know and hopefully respect. In the broader developer ecosystem, you know, Posit's just like a tiny company amongst thousands of other companies, and it's a totally different ballgame hiring just general engineers, because most of them like don't know about Posit at all or what we're trying to do. And there, I think, you know, it's just about the kind of general programming skills and having some interest in data science.
And maybe just to close us out, there's a question from Sierra here about, you know, if you know R and you want to take the step of getting involved in an open source project, I guess, do you have any tips there for someone who's, you know, never contributed to someone else's code in an open source setting before?
Yeah, I think my advice is to like start small and get accustomed to kind of the technical process of like how do you make a pull request on GitHub. And the easiest way to do that is just like proofread documentation because I'm terrible at proofreading, and like whatever I'm working on recently, I'm sure you can find just like little small errors. Like that's not, you know, it's a useful contribution. It's not, you know, it's not amazingly valuable, but that allows you to kind of get over that first hurdle of like, how do I actually do all this stuff? What are the mechanics of creating a patch and submitting it to GitHub? So I really recommend that approach. And then as you get like comfortable with that, you can start to maybe look at some of the issues and try and create reprexes and then maybe start looking at the code a little bit yourself. Another great opportunity, if you happen to be coming to PositConf in September and August, or you live in Seattle, we have a Tidyverse Developer Day coming up, which is just a day where I'll put a link in the chat, where you can just come and try out that process in a very friendly, supportive environment with tons of helpers around. So if you are interested and you can make it, I'd say that's 100% the best way. Otherwise, start small, figure out the mechanics of GitHub, and then, then start trying to tackle some of the simpler issues.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, thank you for your time. And as I mentioned, those questions we have around things like Posit Academy, but we'll follow up with in an email. But yeah, thank you for your time, Hadley, and I'm looking forward to seeing your workshop and hearing you talk next month in Salzburg.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, James. Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming, everyone.